Would you just begin by introducing yourself?
Jason Evert, and I live in San Diego, California, and I work for Catholic Answers.
Great, Jason. I'm wondering if we could just begin by talking about a little bit about the Twilight series, and why do you think this series is such a hit?
Yeah, it has been quite a success. I heard they sold about 1.3 million copies of the fourth book, Breaking Dawn, on the first day. I think one of the reasons why it's captivated the hearts of so many young women, as well as even adult women, is that I think it reveals a crisis of masculinity in our culture. There aren't a lot of chivalrous guys out there, and so when you portray one in a fiction story, the girls are like, that's what I want. I want a guy who protects me. I want a guy who wants what's best for me. And it's so appealing, not necessarily because the literary quality is so exceptional, but simply because I think it touches on the hearts of what so many young women long for, to be desired and to be cared for and protected. Where I think if you look at the average teenage girl, she is surrounded by monsters. It's the way guys treat her in the hallway. I mean, you know, I spend my whole life talking to high school students, and so I know what these girls go through in the hallways on a daily basis, the way the guys act around them, the names they call them, and those are the guys that are their friends, let alone the ones who are their enemies. So I think it's in this culture where they're ripe to hear about a man who actually wants to protect a girl, where he's tempted to be the predator, but he acts as the protector instead. I think what you see in most young men is they want to protect a girl, but they end up using her as their prey, and she ends up being hurt from them. And so girls are very hungry to see the opposite.
Well, would you say that Edward is an exemplary masculine figure?
Well, I think what the novels do is they kind of prey upon every girl's fantasy in a certain sense. A lot of girls today, because of the way media portrays women, think, well, I'm not good enough, I'm not pretty enough, I'm not smart enough, I'm not special enough, no wonderful guy would ever want me. And then along comes Edward Cullen, and he's rich, he drives fancy cars, he's popular, he's cultured, he composes classical music, he's educated, he has 2 degrees from Harvard, he looks like a model, he's gorgeous, he's godlike, and he loves me, he wants me, he craves me. And so I think preys upon this feminine fantasy of being, you know, rescued from obscurity by this perfect godlike man who can't live without you. And so it's preying upon a lot of girls' insecurities and dreams, but the unhealthy thing it leads to, as you see with Bella, I mean, she becomes obsessive, compulsive. Without him, she's suicidal, depressed, she can't live. And high school is not a time for starting up relationships where you think you would die without the other person. You know, that's not a relationship, that's a hostage situation. I mean, there's got to be, you know, more dependence instead of codependence. But at least what we can learn from guys from it is that, you know, maybe we need to be more like Christ. Not saying Edward is like Jesus by any means, but there are some parallels where, you know, he does want the good of his beloved. And that's what love is. John Paul II said, love is not merely a feeling, it is an act of the will that consists of preferring the good of another to the good of oneself. I want what's best for you. And Edward seems to do that sometimes with Bella, you know, protecting her from the werewolf characters and things like that, and the bad vampires or whatever. And so we need to start to step up as guys so that guys like Edward aren't so appealing to women. Because if you think about it, he's really not that appealing. I mean, his skin is cold as ice, as hard as stone, and he glitters, which is peculiar, and, you know, and so there's some things that are just weird about him, and he could bite you, which is a problem, you know, because guys shouldn't bite girls. You know, so there's, you know, there are redeeming qualities to it, but I think we need to be honest about the problems that are objectively there.
Saying that, could this Twilight series be maybe a step back in the right direction, that it's kind of setting up a little bit of maybe more healthy paradigm between men and women, or no?
Well, I mean, it's had some redeeming qualities, and I think that's why we need to be careful as Catholics not to simply dismiss something too quickly for superficial reasons. I think there's a temptation to do that. Well, you know, it talks about vampires. Vampires are bad. You shouldn't read the book. And so you can't simply write it off for those reasons. If you do, the young girls especially, who are so emotionally attached to this novel and to these movies, will take it so personally, and they won't be convinced by these superficial arguments. And I've seen them defend Edward Cullen like he's their boyfriend. Like, well, you don't know Edward, and he's not like that. And they get so, you know, with their buttons and pins and Edward posters and everything. So if you're going to knock it, you've got to have, more substantial reasons, like the fact that it promotes an unhealthy relationship, an emotional codependency. And I'm not saying that I think girls, after seeing a movie, are going to go date Dracula, nowadays because they think he's some romantic figure. I don't think that that's going to happen. But we've got to realize the presence of the occult. There are witches today. There are vampires, people who call themselves warlocks, and the things they are involved in are objectively evil. There are no good witches and bad witches. There's no white magic and black magic. It's all black. And so we've got to be able to recognize the spiritual dangers, to warn the kids against them. So that's a potential problem that's objective. As I had mentioned, the emotional unhealthy relationship, the getting suicidal and depressed because you don't have this boy, and even a deeper feminine problem of finding your identity in a boy instead of finding your identity on your own. I mean, Bella needs to find a life. Bella needs to figure out, where do you want to go to college? What do you want to be when you grow up? What are your dreams? And, I have to admit, I haven't seen the movies. I haven't read a page of the books. And so, I'm not the authority figure on this. Where I'm going after this, and I need to say that up front because I don't want to pretend to be an expert in something that I haven't really read much of. Where I'm more of an expert is the theological circles or the dating relationships, not Twilight per se. But from all I've heard and all I've read, there are some problems that I think we do need to recognize. Let's start taking relationships a little more seriously. And I think something that Bella exemplifies poorly is some girls may physically practice restraint, but emotionally practice none, where they're physically not engaging in the marital act, but they're emotionally married to another individual, like just attached to the hip, I can't exist without him. And then when it doesn't pan out according to your dreams, you're devastated. And I can totally understand with girls, when they meet an Edward Cullen, would just want to give him everything. Finally, a guy who's not a pig, a guy who's not a jerk, a guy who's not, pressuring me to do all these sexual things, but rather is pressuring me, not to do those bad things. And so I can see why a girl would want to pour herself into that kind of relationship. And so it takes a lot of restraint, I think, for a young girl to step back and say, okay, the scriptures tell us, I beg you, do not stir up love before its own time. And love is patient. And so let God bring you the love that he has planned for you, as opposed to just jumping with everything into this relationship. If you want to jump into a relationship with all of your heart, do it with God. Give him, he's totally safe, give him all of your heart. There's no risk of rejection. He's always there for you. And in time, if he calls you to marriage, then he'll bring that person into your life that he has planned for you. And so living with that type of peace and serenity will help someone from falling into the dangers of this emotional Twilight type relationship.
Now, in terms of chastity, should both partners in the relationship be as committed? It almost seems as if Edward is kind of the initiator of the chastity, but what should be the proper dynamic?
So many relationships are delicate like that because it's unevenly yoked. We've got to both be strong for each other, because there's times where the guy's going to be tempted, girl's got to be strong. There's also times the girl's going to be tempted, and the guy better be strong, because if they're not, they're going to fall as soon as one or the other are weak. And it's refreshing to see a guy who's taking a leadership role, so to speak, in initiating something good in the relationship. Girls would find this very refreshing, because the whole point of a man initiating a relationship to begin with is to take the pressure of rejection off of the girl and put it on himself. Because she doesn't face rejection when she's asked out. It's in her control. And so it's been a sign of honor to the woman that you initiate the relationship. Not that you're controlling something, but it's because you want to take the fear of rejection off of her and put it on yourself. And if she's not worth the fear of being rejected, then you obviously don't desire her enough. And so get up some guts, ask a girl out, commit clearly in the relationship, initiate a godly, environment for you guys to grow in love. And so, not that Edward epitomizes all of that, but he does have positive elements of wanting to protect her, saving, intimacy, sexual intimacy for marriage, so there's some pluses there. Overall, I'd say the movie and the novels are problematic because of how they delve into, emotionally unhealthy relationships and how it dabbles in vampires and stuff like that, which is an objective reality today. Not in a science fiction idea of it, but as far as a cult, and people need to be aware of the dangers there.
Jason, is there anything you'd like to add?
If teenagers are struggling in their relationships, I would recommend they visit our website, which is just chastity.com, chastity.com. hieronim.com. We've got over 100 questions and answers that are already answered for them. And you just click, well, I have a dating question about breaking up, about this, and we've got them all organized so that whatever they're struggling with, whether it's chastity or relationships, they can go in and find straight answers to their tough questions. They can watch videos, listen to audio files, download them to their iPods. You know, we've got to meet them where they're at in the culture and give them the tools they need to find the love that they deserve.
Great. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you for having
God
me
bless
on.
you.
Me too.
Thanks.
Thank you.